Good day everyone! The assigned topic that we will be discussed for today is about non-traditional games, which is the board games. So before we're going to the different examples of the board games, here are the meaning of the board games. So board games are a specific type of tabletop game that often include pieces or counters that are moved on a board according to a certain set of rules. So when we say board games, it's all about a play or a games in the board, or we can say it a games on the top of the table. Also, we have different pieces or counters in the board games, and we have a certain set of rules na i-discuss natin later. Next, board games vary significantly in complexity, with most including an element of chance and some being based purely on chance. Like for example, many board games require players to roll a dice, which depends largely on chance, whereas others are more skill-based or focus on turn-taking. The first board games is chess. I know some of you alam ang larong ito and alam kung paano laruin. The history of chess. The history of chess spans 1,500 years. The earliest predecessor of the game probably originated in India before the 6th century AD or Anno Domini. So chess came from India. From India, the game spread to Persia, Arab, and Southern Europe. In Europe, chess evolved brutally its current form in 15th century. The second half of the 19th century, modern chess tournament play began. So, modern chess tournament was started on second half of 19th century, and the first World Chess Championship was held in 1886. The 20th century saw great leaps forward in chess theory and the establishment of the World Chess Federation according to FIDE. Its early form in the 6th century was known as Chaturanga. So when we say Chaturanga, it translates as 4 divisions of the military, which are the infantry, cavalry, elephantry, and chariotry. These forms are represented by the pieces that would evolve in the modern pawn, knight, bishop, and rook respectively. So when we say the pawn is the infantry, the knight is the cavalry, and the elephantry is the bishop, and the rook is chariotry. The game Chaturanga was a battle of simulation game which rendered Indian military strategy of time. Chess was used by Indian tool for military strategy, mathematics, and lastly is gambling. Objectives of chess. The objective in chess is to checkmate your opponent's king. So the main objective or the main goal of chess game is to checkmate your opponent's king. We have here a 4 potential ways that the chess game can end. First, you can checkmate your opponent. That's our main objective. Second, you and your opponent can reach stalemate or draw, tabla yung laban. Third, in time games, each player has a specific amount of time to make their moves. So, in chess tournament, limited lang yung time. We make a moves. And then, kapag hindi mo na-reach yung amount of time, matatalo ka. So, ma-end yung chess game. Next, either player may resign at any time and their opponent wins the game. So, sometimes some players are quitting in game. Kaya the tendency, mananalo yung kalaban or the opponent. That's why ma-end na naman yung chess game. The rules of chess. First, act of moving the pieces. The movement of pieces to be done with one hand. So, in chess, the required hand when we move the pieces is only one hand. When castling, the player should first move the king with one hand and then move the rook with the same hand. So, if you are familiar with castling, it is sometimes called in rook if I'm not mistaken. So when we castling, we first move the king and then you will move the rook adjacent to the king, but same hand lang yung gagamitin natin. Next is touch move rule. In serious play, if a player having the move touches one of their pieces as if having the intention of moving it, then the player must move it if it can be legally moved. So, like the chess tournament. Yung chess tournament, yung touch move rule is tige-implement po talaga yon to consider the move as a legally move. Third is timing. Tournament games are played under time constraint called time controls using a game clock. So, in chess tournament, limited lang yung time every we make a move. So, dapat masunod natin yon para maiwasan yung pagkatalo. Third is recording moves. In formal competition, each player is obliged to record each move as it is played in a chess notation in order to settle disputes about a legal position, overstepping time control, and making claims of draws by the 50 move rule or repetition of position. So, sa mga formal competition, required din yung to take down the notes or record to prevent nga ng illegal possession, overstepping time control, and making claims of draws by the 50 move rule or repetition of position. So, taking down notes or recording moves. So, that's our rules of chess. The setup of chess game. Chess is played on a chessboard, a square board divided into 64 squares 8 by 8 of alternating color, which is similar to that used in draughts or checkers according to FIDE 2008. So, the chess have a 64 squares 8 by 8 having a alternated color white, black, and so on. So, yung board in chess is just like in draughts game or checkers. No matter what the actual colors of the board, the lighter colored squares are called light or white, and the darker colored squares are called dark or black. So just like in the picture, we have a lighter color, a white, and darker color, a black. The pieces in chess game. So we have here a number and symbols, each pieces. So we have king, 1 each player queen, 1 each player rook, 2 each player bishop, 2 each player knight, 2 each player pawn, 8 each player. So here is the final setup of chess game. We must take note that every player have a 16 pieces. It can be 16 black pieces or it can be 16 white pieces. And then for chess game, we have only 2 players each game. So moving forward, the pieces of chess and movements. First, king. The king is the most important chess piece on the chessboard. If he is checkmated, the game is over. So, king is considered as the most important chess piece on the chess game. Why? Because, like I've said a while ago in our objectives in chess, so the main objective is to checkmate your opponent's king. That's why it is the most important chess piece on the chess game. Next, the king moves exactly 1 square, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. So, any number of square that is exactly 1, pwede natin i-move yung king. It can be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. So, just like on the picture. So, yung mga arrow, pwede natin dyan i-put yung king to move. So, next, castling. Consists of moving the king 2 squares towards the rook, then placing the rook on the other side of the king adjacent to it. So, sabi ko nga kanina, castling, it is sometimes called in rook. So, when we castling, we first move the king into 2 squares only towards a rook. And then, you will move the rook with the same hand na ginamit mo sa pag-move ng king. And then, you will put on the side of the king adjacent to it. So, that is castling. Next is rook. There are 2 rook for each player on the chessboard, situated on the corners next to the knight. A rook moves any number of vacant squares in a horizontal or vertical direction. So, any number of squares na vacant, but also it is horizontal and vertical direction, pwede natin i-move yung rook. It also is moved when casting. So, sabi ko nga kanina, when we castling or in rook, ginagamit natin yung rook. So, as you can see po sa picture, may mga X dyan. It represented na pwede natin i-move dyan yung rook. So, pwedeng horizontal, pwedeng vertical, basta vacant yung squares. Next, bishop. Situated next to the queen and king respectively, the bishop is bound to the color where it starts on. One bishop starts on a white square and the other starts on a black square. So, every player, yung 2 player having a 2 bishops. So, the 1 bishop of each player starts on a white square. While yung other bishop ng kada player starts on a black square. A bishop moves any number of vacant squares in a diagonal direction. So, any number of vacant squares na diagonal direction, pwede natin i-move yung bishop. So, unlike sa rook, minimove natin yung rook na vertical and horizontal direction. So, yung bishop is diagonal direction only. Next is knight. The knight is situated between the bishop and the rook. These chess pieces have the unique trait of being able to leap over other chess pieces. They move L-shape. So, knight, it is sometimes called horse. So, every player having a 2 knights, and then it is considered as a unique trait. Why? Kasi among all of the chess pieces, yung knight lang yung nakakatalon. Kasi yung movement ng knight is L-shape. A knight moves to the nearest square, not on the same rank, file, or diagonal. So, just like on the picture po. Next is queen. The queen is considered the most powerful chess piece on the chessboard. She is placed next to the king on her own color. The queen moves any number of vacant squares in a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal direction. That's why it is considered as the most powerful chess piece kasi pwede niyang i-move yung movement ng rook, bishop, and pawn. Next is pawn. Each player has 8 pawns, providing the first line of defense for their king. So, yung pawn is nasa second row ng each player. In their first move, each pawn has the option to move 1 or 2 spaces. After this move, they can only move 1 space forward. To capture, the pawn moves diagonally 1 space. So, as you can see, in the picture po, when we first move the pawn, we have only 2 options. It's either we move 1 space or it's either we move 2 spaces. So, after na ma-move natin yung pawn from the first move, yung movement niya na lang is 1 space na lang. Bawal na siya mag 2 spaces. And then, kapag nag-capture tayo ng opponent pawn, diagonal ang pag-capture. Just like on the picture po. So, diagonal only. And then, take note that pawn can never move backwards. Next is pawn promotion. If a player advances a pawn to its 8th rank, the pawn is then promoted or converted to a queen, rook, bishop, or knight of the same color at the choice of the player. A queen is usually chosen. So, yung pawn is na-promote kapag yung pawn mo is makaabot duman sa first rank ng opponent. So, pwede siyang maging queen, pwede siyang maging rook, pwede siyang maging bishop, but mostly, ang pinipili nila is queen. Kasi maraming movement yung queen. So, here is the meaning of check in the chess game. A king is in check when it is under attack by at least one enemy piece. A piece unable to move because it would place its own king in check. It is pinned against its own king, may still deliver check to the opposing player. So, we have different ways to get out of check. So, we will discuss. A player may not make any move which places or leaves his king in check. The possible ways to get out of check are: first, move the king to a square where it is not threatened. So, if possible na pwede natin i-move yung king from the other square na hindi in check, i-move natin yung king to get out in check. So, next, capture the threatening piece possibly with the king. So, kapag malapit naman yung piece sa king, pwede natin i-capture yung piece ng kalaban, or pwede natin i-capture gamit yung ibang pieces natin, kung pwede. Next, block the check by placing a piece between the king and the opponent's threatening piece. So, block. So, maglalagay tayo ng ating mga pieces to block the check. So, dyan po nagtatapos ang aking reporting. Thank you for listening. And for the continuation of my reporting, i-discuss po ng aking ibang kagrupo. Again, thank you for listening.